Here I'm going to talk about this novel called Klara and Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. The key theme of this novel is the idea that robots will begin to replace humans in our lives. This novel shows how a robot begins to almost become part of the family. So Klara is the narrator, and she is an artificial friend. In other words, she is a robot that's programmed to be friends with humans. And so obviously we're getting the narration through a robot, so it's an unreliable narrative. Ishiguro likes to use this device. He's used it in novels such as The Remains of the Day, where the butler is an unreliable narrator. Unreliable narration adds interest to works of fiction, largely because it makes it so the reader has to puzzle out what's going on and makes the reader feel more involved in the narrative. So Klara starts off her life in the novel in a showroom where she's being put on sale. Klara is an intelligent robot, and she wants to do the best for her employers, so she wants to get sold. And she likes being at the front of the showroom where she can see outside. She notices a beggar and his dog, and notices that in the morning when the sun comes up, they spring back to life. So she begins to feel that the sun has a kind of healing power, almost a magical, mystical power. Hence the title of the work, Klara and Sun. The robot is never described in detail, which I think is a great idea because it will make it so this novel ages really well, because we don't really know what robots of the future will actually look like. So Josie has been lifted. In other words, she's been genetically altered to make her more intelligent, but unfortunately this has made her ill. And that is a real dystopian aspect to this novel, the idea that people need to be made more intelligent to compete with other people. And there are indications that her sister was lifted and then died as a result. Rick is her neighbor, and he hasn't been lifted. And Klara doesn't really understand the relationship they have with each other, because Klara doesn't really understand social cues at all. Klara begins to believe that the sun rests in the barn, and she goes down to plead with the sun to rescue Josie, because that's her role in life, to help Josie return to health and be her companion in life. People tend to talk with poetic license from time to time in life, and Josie does this, ascribing human characteristics to inanimate objects. But Klara takes these words seriously, and this leads to Klara believing that the sun rests in the barn. Klara isn't there to ask questions, she's there as an artificial friend. So you can see how misunderstandings develop. I think this is a really interesting part of Ishiguro's novel here. And I think he writes it very carefully and well. So Klara tries to piece together what on earth's happening around her. She partially understands the landscapes around her and partially understands humans and different characters, but never really fully understands what's going on. She doesn't understand particularly things like humor, sarcasm, and art, and is clearly bewildered at times. We learn that other robots are better than her, and some are the same as her. So there's a grading going on in the robot world, just as in the human world in this dystopia. Josie's mother wants Klara to imitate Josie so she can learn to almost be her. For in case Josie dies. This kind of went a bit too far for me. I mean, I don't imagine a mother ever wanting a robot replication. I won't say exactly how this novel ends so that people can enjoy reading it themselves. In this novel, I like the way that the robot thinks differently. Thinks in terms of my pictures, boxes, gradients, and acoustics. It's well written, but not enough happened for me. He writes well to make you feel like Klara is part of the family. There's the occasional nice line. For example, that's the nice thing about England. Hedges give a sense of history properly set down in the land. There we can see that traditional England is being contrasted with a scary dystopian future. This novel raises the question about if robots could ever really have emotions, which I personally find ludicrous, so that didn't work for me. On the whole, I think this novel is a really good idea because I can imagine robots of the future being programmed so that they tell their life story at the end. Because a robot is narrating, the language used is relatively simplistic, so don't expect to learn any new words when you read this novel. Basically, I quite like this novel. I'd give it 4 out of 5 stars.